The spy used the woman as a disguise, but the poison she carried made him lose control. The charity gala at the Grand Hotel Imperial sparkled with old European wealth and new money pretensions. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across marble floors, where Vienna's elite moved in choreographed sophistication, their designer gowns and tailored suits a uniform of power and privilege. Adrian Cross, though that wasn't his real name, and he'd stopped remembering what was six identities agonist, a glass of champagne he had no intention of drinking, and watched his target across the ballroom, Dmitry Volkov, arms dealer, money launderer, and the key to dismantling a network that had already cost 14 agents their lives. But Volkov was paranoid, traveling with a private security detail that could rival small nations' military forces. Getting close required more than skill, it required invisibility. And nothing made a dangerous man invisible quite like a beautiful woman on his arm. That's where she came in. Dr. Sarah Nikolov stood near the string quartet, pretending to appreciate Vivaldi while clearly wishing she were anywhere else. Adrian had studied her file obsessively for 3 days, 32 years old. Brilliant biochemist specializing in rare toxins, Russian by birth but Vienna-based for the past 5 years. Single, no family, no ties, perfect. What made her even more perfect, and what his handler had emphasized with unusual intensity, was what she carried in her blood. A rare genetic mutation that made her immune to a specific class of neurotoxins. Immunity that had been carefully cultivated, enhanced, through years of controlled exposure. She was, in the parlance of his organization, a clean weapon, someone who could carry death itself and never suffer its effects. Adrian didn't need her immunity. He needed her face, her elegance, her obvious discomfort at these events that made her seem innocent and unthreatening. He needed a disguise that breathed and smiled and made him look human. He approached with the practiced charm of a man who'd seduced his way through a dozen operations. Champagne flute balanced perfectly. Smile calculated to disarm. "You look as thrilled to be here as I feel," he said in flawless Russian. Watching her dark eyes widen slightly at hearing her native language in this sea of German and English. "Is it that obvious?" She responded in kind, her voice carrying the educated Moscow accent of someone who'd grown up in privilege before circumstances changed. Only to someone equally desperate for escape. Adrian extended his hand. "Adrian Petrov, investment banker, which is just a sophisticated way of saying, I move money for people who have too much of it." She took his hand, her grip surprisingly firm. Clinical land, he felt something unexpected, a slight electric current, like static, but warmer. He dismissed it as attraction, the kind of base physical response he'd learned to compartmentalize. Cyranic, biochemist, which is an antisocial way of saying, I work with things that would kill you before you could pronounce their names. Adrian laughed, and the sound was so genuine, it surprised him. A woman who works with death. How refreshingly honest. In my experience, honesty is refreshing precisely because it's so rare. She studied him with eyes that were far too intelligent, far too observant. So what does an investment banker want with a scientist at a charity gala neither of us wants to attend? Honestly. He leaned closer, lowering his voice conspiratorially. I need to look less predatory. Men like me, we come to these events to hunt for investments, partnerships, opportunities. It makes us look dangerous. But a man with a beautiful woman on his arm, he's just showing off, much less threatening. Sarah's eyebrow arched. So you want to use me as camouflage? I prefer the term mutually beneficial arrangement. I get to look harmless, you get to look less bored. We can leave whenever you want. I'll donate enough to satisfy the organizers. And we both escape this glittering prison with our sanity intact. She shouldn't have agreed. Everything about him screamed danger, the way he moved. The way his eyes never stopped scanning the room, even while talking to her. The perfect tailoring that couldn't quite hide what looked like exceptionally well-developed combat musculature. But Sarah Nikolov had spent 5 years in Vienna running from her past, working in a laboratory, living a half-life of safety and suffocating boredom. And this man, dangerous or not, was the most interesting thing to happen to her in years. 1 hour, she said. I'll be your camouflage for 1 hour. Then I'm leaving. Adrian's smile was devastating. 1 hour. I promised to make it interesting. He had no idea how prophetic that statement would become. Adrian offered his arm, and Sarah took it, immediately feeling the coiled strength beneath the expensive fabric of his suit. They moved through the ballroom, and she noticed how the crowd seemed to part for them, not obviously, but subtly, as if his presence created its own gravitational field. "So," she said, playing her role, "what exactly are you hunting for tonight, Mr. Petrov?" "Call me Adrian, and I'm not hunting him." Observing there's a difference, he guided her toward the edge of the ballroom, where they had a better vantage point. "See that man by the champagne fountain? Gray suit, surrounded by men who look like they eat nails for breakfast." Sira followed his gaze and felt her blood turn cold. Dmitry Volkov, she knew that face, though she'd hoped never to see it again. "I see him. That's Dmitry Volkov. Businessman, philanthropist, and according to people who pay attention to such things, one of the most dangerous men in Eastern Europe." Adrian's voice remained casual, but Sira felt the tension in his arm. "I need to get close to him, learn what I can, and a man like that won't talk to another man alone, too suspicious. But a couple, just socializing." Sira's mind raced. She should pull away, make an excuse, disappear. Volkov was part of the world she'd fled, part of the darkness she'd worked so hard to escape. "What's your real interest in him?" she asked quietly. "And don't tell me investments." Adrian looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw something flicker in his eyes, surprise, maybe, or respect. "You're very perceptive, Dr. Nikolov. You're very transparent, Mr. Petrov, or whatever your real name is." A slow smile. "Touché, let's just say. Volkov has something I need, information, and I'm willing to be very creative in acquiring it." "Your intelligence?" Sira said flatly. "CIA, MI6, FSB, does it matter?" "It does, if you're planning to use me to get close to a man who would happily have me killed if he knew who I really was." Now Adrian's full attention was on her, the casual playboy facade dropping completely. "And who are you really, Dr. Nikolov?" Before Sarah could answer, a commotion near the entrance drew everyone's attention. Volkov's security detail had stiffened, hands moving toward concealed weapons. Someone was forcing their way through the crowd. Adrian moved instantly, pulling Sira behind him in a gesture that was purely protective and entirely instinctive. She felt his body shift, saw his stance change into something that had nothing to do with investment banking and everything to do with violence. The crowd parted, and a man stumbled into the open space, young, disheveled, eyes wild with fear, and something else, something Sira recognized immediately. "Poison," she breathed. "He's been poisoned." The man's lips were already turning blue, foam flecking at the corners of his mouth. Convulsions started, and screams erupted from the guests. Adrian's hand tightened on her arm. "What kind?" Sira was already moving, pulling free, dropping to her knees beside the dying man. Her hands moved with clinical precision, checking pupils, pulse, skin temperature. "Neurotoxin, fast-acting. He has maybe 2 minutes." She looked up at the frozen crowd. "Does anyone have epinephrine? An EpiPen?" Silence. Paralyzed horror. "I have something better," Sarah said, more to herself than anyone else. She reached for her clutch, pulled out a small vial she always carried, habit from years of working with toxins, insurance against accidents. Adrian watched as she administered the injection with steady hands, watched as the man's convulsions eased, watched as she quite literally pulled him back from death. And he realized 2 things simultaneously. First, she'd just revealed herself as far more than a simple biochemist. Second, he was completely, utterly compromised, because Adrian Cross, professional spy, trained to view everyone as either assets or obstacles, found himself caring whether Sarah Nikolov survived the night. The aftermath was chaos. Ambulances, police, Volkov and his security detail disappearing like smoke before authorities could ask uncomfortable questions. The gala dissolved into panicked departure, wealthy patrons fleeing contamination, both literal and social. Adrian kept Sarah close, his hand never leaving the small of her back as he navigated them through the confusion. She didn't resist, still processing what had just happened. "We need to leave," he said quietly. "Now. The police will want statements. The police will want to know why you were carrying an experimental antidote to a military-grade neurotoxin in your evening bag." His voice was gentle but urgent. "And I'm guessing you'd prefer not to answer that question." Sira's silence was answer enough. They slipped out through a service entrance, Adrian moving with the easy confidence of someone who'd memorized every exit before entering. A car waited too conveniently. Sira noticed and they were inside and moving before she could question it. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Somewhere safe. Somewhere we can talk. I don't know you. No, Adrian agreed, the streetlights of Vienna strobing across his face. But you saved a man's life tonight using something you shouldn't have access to, which means you're either extremely connected or extremely illegal. Either way, the people who poisoned that man will want to know who interfered. Sarah felt cold dread settle in her stomach. She'd been careful for 5 years. 5 years of keeping her head down, of being nobody, of pretending her past didn't exist. One moment of compassion had destroyed it all. Who are you? She asked again. Someone who can help. If you let me. The car pulled up to a nondescript building in the Innenstadt district. Adrian led her inside, through security that was far too sophisticated for a residential building, up to a penthouse that was equal parts luxury apartment and tactical operations center. Make yourself comfortable, he said, moving to a bank of computers. We have about an hour before they identify you from security footage. An hour before, who identifies me? The same people who tried to kill that man. The same people who realize you not only saved him but did so using a countermeasure that shouldn't exist outside of classified military research. Sarah sank into a leather chair, her mind racing. You knew there would be an attempt tonight. I knew something was happening. I didn't know what, or when, or how. Adrian's fingers flew across keyboards, screens filling with data. But you knew exactly what that poison was. You had the antidote ready. You've been exposed to it before. It wasn't a question. Sarah was silent for a long moment, weighing options, calculating risks. Finally, my father was a biochemist for the FSB. He developed new neurotoxins for various applications. As a child, I was exposed to controlled doses, building immunity, making me useful. A human test subject, Adrian said, and there was anger in his voice that surprised her. A weapon, Sarah corrected. I could handle substances that would kill anyone else. Could carry them, administer them, survive exposure. Very useful for our intelligence service. But you left. I escaped. The correction was sharp. When they wanted to use me for an assassination, I couldn't morally justify. Ran. Changed my name, changed my face just enough. Buried myself in legitimate research. Tried to be normal. Adrian turned to face her fully. There's no such thing as normal for people like us. People like us. People who've been turned into weapons. People who've seen too much, done too much, know too much to ever really be free. He crossed to her, crouched down so they were eye level. I wasn't lying about needing you as cover tonight. But I also wasn't entirely honest about why. You're going to kill Volkov, Ciro said. No. I'm going to stop him from selling a new generation of chemical weapons to people who use them on civilians. But to do that, I need to get close. And to get close, I need a woman who can handle toxins, who can get past his security because she's immune to the very weapons he's selling. Sarah felt pieces clicking into place. You didn't just choose me randomly tonight. You've been watching me. For 3 weeks, Adrian admitted. I'm sorry. It was strategic, practical. Exactly what I would have done. Sarah studied him. This man who'd pulled her from safety into danger, who looked at her with something that might have been guilt or might have been desire or might have been both. So what now? You use me to get to Volkov, complete your mission, and I go back to my laboratory. That was the plan. With Adrian's hand came up, almost unconsciously, to brush a strand of hair from her face. Plans change. You saved that man tonight. You didn't have to. It compromised your cover, put you at risk. And you did it anyway because it was the right thing to do, and that matters to you. More than it should. His voice was rough. I've spent 10 years viewing people as pieces on a board. Assets, obstacles, collateral damage. But you're something different, something dangerous. I'm the one who's dangerous. Sarah couldn't help the slight smile. You're the spy who uses women as disguises. And you're the woman carrying poison in your blood, who just destroyed my carefully maintained emotional detachment. He stood abruptly, as if proximity to her was physically painful. We have options. I can get you out of Vienna tonight. New identity, new location, new life. You disappear again, properly this time. Or you help me finish what we started. We take down Volkov together, stop the weapons sale, and maybe you get to stop running, by running directly into danger. That's your definition of stopping. No, by facing it head on, by choosing to fight instead of hide. Adrian's eyes met hers, and Sarah saw the truth in them. He wasn't offering safety, he was offering purpose. I won't lie to you, it's dangerous. There's a very real chance one or both of us doesn't survive. But if we succeed, Volkov's network collapses. The weapons never reach the people who'd use them, and you get to be more than a lab technician hiding from your past. Sierra thought about 5 years of safety, 5 years of quiet desperation, of waking up every day waiting for the knock on the door, the bullet in the dark, the poison in her coffee. 5 years of surviving but not living. How long do we have to plan? She asked. Adrian's smile was sudden and brilliant. 48 hours. Volkov's meeting his buyers in 2 days. After that, the weapons ship and it's too late to stop them. 48 hours to infiltrate one of the most paranoid arms dealers in Europe and stop a weapons deal worth millions. Sierra stood, moved to the windows overlooking Vienna's glittering nightscape. We'll need a better plan than using me as a pretty distraction. I'm open to suggestions. She turned, and Adrian saw something in her expression that made his breath catch, not fear, not resignation, but excitement, the look of someone who'd been caged too long, finally seeing open sky. Then, let's get to work, Sierra said, because if I'm going to risk my life, I'm going to do it properly. They worked through the night, and Adrian discovered that Sarah Nikolov was far more than a brilliant scientist hiding from her past. She was a tactician, able to see patterns in Volkov's security protocols that Adrian had missed. She understood the psychology of paranoid men because she'd grown up around them. Volkov will never trust you completely, she explained, pointing to surveillance photos spread across the table. But he doesn't need to trust you. He needs to trust me. Explain. You approach him as a buyer, someone interested in acquiring his inventory. But buyers make him nervous. They're usually undercover agents or competitors. She pulled up a file on her laptop. But I approach him as a consultant, someone who can verify the authenticity and potency of his merchandise. Toxicologists with my clearance level are rare. If I'm willing to work with him, he'll want to keep you close, to use your expertise. Adrian nodded slowly. It's brilliant. It's also incredibly dangerous. If he recognizes you, he won't. I was 16 when I left. I've had minor facial surgery. My name is different, and Volkov has trafficked enough scientists that one more won't register as significant. Unless he runs your DNA, then we make sure he doesn't have time. Sierra met his eyes. This works, Adrian. It gets me inside his inner circle, gets you access to the sale location, and gives us the opportunity to sabotage the entire operation. Adrian studied her. This woman who'd appeared in his operation as a convenient prop and was rapidly becoming its linchpin. You've thought about this before. Going after Volkov. I've thought about going after everyone from my old life. Her voice was quiet but fierce. I've spent 5 years running. Maybe it's time to make them run instead. Something in Adrian's chest tightened. He recognized that tone, the moment when survival became purpose, when fear transformed into fury. If we do this, he said carefully, there's no going back. Your cover in Vienna is blown regardless. Win or lose, you'll need a new identity, a new location. I've done it before, but this time you won't be running alone. The words came out before Adrian could stop them, before he could apply his usual filters and calculations. Sierra looked at him, really looked at him, and Adrian felt exposed in a way no amount of cover identities could protect against. Are you offering partnership or protection? She asked. I'm offering the truth, he said. Which is that somewhere between using you as cover and watching you save a dying man, I stopped seeing you as an asset and started seeing you as he stopped, surprised by his own vulnerability. As someone I don't want to lose. The silence stretched between them, heavy with implications and dangerous possibilities. We should focus on the mission, Sierra said finally, but her voice was unsteady. Personal complications tend to get people killed. Agreed. Adrian moved back to the planning table, but the distance felt wrong now, artificial. Volkov's meeting is in 48 hours at a private estate outside the city. He'll have security, buyers, and the merchandise. Our window is narrow, then we need to be perfect. Sierra pulled up schematics of the estate. And we need insurance. What kind of insurance? She reached into her bag, pulled out 3 small vials of clear liquid. Remember how I told you my father made me immune to neurotoxins? He also taught me how to make them. These are modified versions, not lethal, but incapacitating, fast-acting, virtually undetectable until it's too late. Adrian looked at the vials, then at the woman holding them. You've been carrying these the whole time. I told you I'm a weapon. I've just been choosing not to fire. She set the vials on the table. But if we're doing this, if we're really taking down Volkov, then I'm done pretending to be harmless. Adrian reached out, his hand covering hers on the table. You're not a weapon. You're a person who happens to have dangerous skills. There's a difference. Is there? Are you not a weapon for your organization? Don't they point you at problems and expect you to eliminate them? Maybe we're both recovering weapons trying to remember how to be human. His thumb traced circles on her hand, and he felt her pulse jump. Maybe that's why this terrifies me so much. What terrifies you? Sierra's voice was barely a whisper. That I've spent 10 years perfecting emotional detachment, and you destroyed it in 3 hours. That I'm supposed to be focused on the mission, and all I can think about is keeping you safe. That I'm falling for my own asset, which is rule number 1 of things you never ever do. Sierra's free hand came up to touch his face. Her fingers cooled against his skin. And what if your asset is falling for you? What if she's spent 5 years being careful and careful and careful, and you made her want to be reckless? Adrian closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. Then we're both compromised. Completely, she agreed. This is a terrible idea. The worst. We should maintain professional distance. Absolutely should. I'm going to kiss you anyway. You'd better. And he did. The kiss was not gentle. It was desperate and fierce. 5 years of Sierra's isolation and 10 years of Adrian's emotional walls crashing together. His hands tangled in her hair, pulling her closer. She responded with equal intensity, as if trying to prove through physical contact that this moment was real, that they were both alive and present and choosing this despite every logical reason not to. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian pressed his forehead to hers. This doesn't change the mission, he said. I know. We still have to stop Volkov. I know. And after Pather, assuming we survive, we'll both disappear to different locations. Protocol demands it. I know. Sierra pulled back slightly, her eyes meeting his. But maybe just maybe we both disappear to the same location, together. Adrian felt something crack open in his chest, something he'd thought dead years ago. You're offering me a future, he said, wonder in his voice. I'm offering us a future. If we're brave enough to take it. She smiled, and it was beautiful and terrifying. But first, we have to survive the next 48 hours. Together, Adrian said. Together, she agreed. The private estate where Volkov conducted his business, sat in the Vienna woods, like a fortress, masquerading as elegance. Stone walls, manicured gardens, and security that included both human guards and sophisticated electronic surveillance. Adrian and Sierra arrived in separate vehicles, maintaining the fiction that they'd only recently met through mutual business interests. She wore a severe black suit that somehow made her look both professional and devastating. He wore the bored expression of a wealthy buyer too jaded to be impressed by anything. Dr. Nikolai Volkov greeted her in Russian, his smile not reaching his eyes. I'm told you have expertise in verification of certain specialized materials. I have experience with toxicological assessment, Sierra replied, her voice cool and professional. If your merchandise is as potent as claimed, I can confirm it. If not, I'll say so. I don't waste my time or my reputation on inferior products. Volkov's smile widened slightly. He appreciated directness, or at least the appearance of it. And you, Mr. Petrov, you represent interests in the Middle East, I understand. I represent people who pay well for guaranteed results, Adrian said. Your reputation precedes you, Mr. Volkov, but reputation and reality don't always align. That's why I brought verification. He gestured to Sierra. No offense intended. None taken. Caution in our business is survival. Volkov gestured them deeper into the estate. Please, let me show you what you've come to see. They followed him through elegant hallways lined with art with millions, the legitimate face of an illegitimate empire. Other buyers were arriving, led by Volkov's security to a large conference room where the auction would take place. But Volkov took Adrian and Sierra elsewhere, to a private laboratory set up in what had probably once been a wine cellar. As you can see, I take quality control seriously, Volkov said, gesturing to equipment that made Sierra's professional eye widen despite herself. Dr. Nikolov, if you'd like to examine the samples, this was the test. If Sarah couldn't convincingly verify the toxins, their cover was blown. If she did it too well, Volkov might insist on keeping her as a permanent consultant, which meant never letting her leave alive. She had to thread the needle perfectly. Sierra moved to the lab bench, pulled on gloves with practiced ease, and began examining the samples. Adrian watched her work, marveling at the transformation. She became someone else entirely, all cold professionalism and scientific precision. "The synthesis is excellent," she said after 20 minutes of analysis. "Purity is above 98%. Degradation minimal even without optimal storage." She looked up at Volkov. "However, the delivery mechanism is flawed." Volkov's expression hardened. "Explain." "The aerosol dispersion system you're using creates particle sizes too large for optimal absorption. You'll get maybe 60% efficiency. People will die, yes, but not quickly enough to prevent countermeasures." She pulled up data on a tablet. "You need a smaller particle generator. I can recommend a supplier." It was brilliant, Adrian realized. She'd confirmed the product's quality, establishing credibility while identifying a flaw that made her valuable without being threatening. Volkov considered her words, then nodded slowly. "Your expertise is appreciated, Dr. Pahovta. Perhaps we can discuss a longer-term consulting arrangement." Pahovta Sierra said neutrally. "After I see how this transaction concludes, I prefer to evaluate the full scope of an operation before committing to ongoing work." Cautious-wise, Volkov turned to Adrian. "And you, Mr. Petrov, are you satisfied with the quality? If Dr. Nikolov says it's legitimate, then I'm interested in quantities and pricing." Adrian pulled out a phone. "My principals will want confirmation before transferring funds." "Of course. The auction begins in 1 hour. Please, make yourselves comfortable. Refreshments are available in the main salon." As Volkov left them, Adrian and Sarah exchanged the briefest of glances. They were in. Now came the dangerous part. The auction was exactly what Adrian expected: wealthy men and women bidding on death with the same casual interest they might show for art or wine. The toxins were displayed like jewelry, their lethal potential translated into cold numbers and projected kill ratios. Sierra sat beside Adrian, her face carefully neutral, but he could feel the tension radiating from her. This was her father's legacy: weapons designed to kill efficiently and horribly, now being sold to the highest bidder. "Lot 17, the auctioneer announced. "A binary nerve agent, stable for transport, lethal within 2 minutes of exposure. Sufficient quantity to contaminate a water supply serving 50,000 people. Opening bid, €2 million. The bidding was brisk. Adrian participated enough to maintain his cover, but not enough to actually win. His goal wasn't to acquire weapons, it was to identify who was trying to acquire them and for what purpose. But then he saw Sierra's hand move to her bag, saw her fingers close around one of the vials she'd brought. "What are you doing?" he murmured. "Ending this," she breathed back. "The ventilation system in this room circulates air throughout the building. One vial in the right duct, and everyone here is incapacitated within minutes. That's not the plan. Plans change." Her eyes met his, and he saw determination mixed with something darker. Age, maybe, or justice. "These people are here to buy weapons that will kill thousands. Innocent people, children. And we're just going to let them because protocol says we gather intelligence first. Sierra, my entire childhood was spent being poisoned so I could be useful to monsters. My father died creating these weapons. I've spent 5 years running from this legacy." Her voice was fierce but controlled. "I'm not running anymore. And I'm not letting this sale happen." Adrian's mind raced through calculations, risk assessment, probability matrices, potential outcomes. Everything in his training screamed that this was wrong, that deviating from plan was how operations failed and agents died. But then, he looked at Cyrilli, looked at her and saw something his training had never accounted for. The moral certainty of someone who'd suffered enough and decided that some things mattered more than survival. "If you do this, there's no clean exit," he said quietly. "Volkov's security will lock down the building. We'll have to fight our way out. I know. You could die. I know." She touched his face, a gentle gesture in the midst of lethal planning. "But I'm tired of living small and safe. I'm tired of letting evil happen because stopping it is risky. You said I'm not a weapon, prove it. Let me choose how to use my skills." Adrian felt the last of his professional detachment shatter. She was right about all of it. This auction represented death on a massive scale. Stopping it meant breaking protocol, meant risking everything, meant choosing moral imperative over strategic patience. It meant being human instead of a tool. "The ventilation intake is in the northwest corner," he said. We have maybe 3 minutes after you release the toxin before effects become obvious. Can you hold your breath that long? Sierra smiled. I've been holding my breath for 5 years. 3 minutes is nothing. Then let's burn it all down. They moved with synchronized precision born of too many hours planning together. Sierra excused herself to the restroom, a natural movement that drew no attention. Adrian created a small distraction by questioning a lot number, drawing the auctioneer's focus. Sierra reached the ventilation intake, uncapped the vial, and poured its contents into the duct. The liquid evaporated instantly, pulled into the circulation system by the building's own mechanics. She was back in her seat 30 seconds later. Adrian's hand found hers under the table, squeezed once. Now they waited. The first sign was subtle, a buyer in the front row swaying slightly, then another rubbing their eyes, confusion spreading through the room as people realized something was wrong. Volkov's security reacted immediately, moving to protect their employer. But they were already affected, movements becoming sluggish, coordination failing. "Lockdown," Volkov shouted, but his voice was slurred. "We're under attack." He collapsed mid-sentence. Within 90 seconds, every person in the auction room was unconscious except Adrian and Sierra. "How long do we have?" Adrian asked, already moving. "They'll wake up in 6 hours with headaches and no permanent damage." Sierra was at the auction table, photographing everything: buyers, merchandise, documentation. "We need to destroy the toxins and copy all records." Already on it. Adrian had his phone out, uploading data to his handlers. "Extraction team is 10 minutes out, but Volkov's external security will have seen this. We've got maybe 5 minutes before they breach, then we work fast." They moved through the estate like professionals, gathering intelligence, destroying Volkov's inventory, securing evidence that would dismantle his entire network. It was beautiful in its efficiency to people who'd known each other days, moving with the precision of partners who'd worked together for years. Then alarms began to sound. "External security," Adrian confirmed. "They're coming in hard. We need to go now." But as they reached the main hallway, they found their path blocked. Not by security, by Volkov himself. Somehow conscious despite the toxin, a gun in his shaking hand. "Immunity," he gasped, looking at Sarah with dawning recognition and rage. "You have ... immunity. You're one of them. One of Mikhail's subjects." Sarah froze. "You knew my father." "Knew him. I funded his research. Made him rich beyond his dreams." Volkov's hand steadied on the gun. "And you're the little girl he used to bring to ... the laboratory. All grown up, all ... traitorous." "My father was a monster," Sarah said quietly. "And so are you." Then we ... family. Volkov smiled through the toxin's effects. "And family. Always re..." He pulled the trigger. Adrian moved faster than thought, pulling Sarah behind him. The bullet that would have killed her caught him in the shoulder, instead a burst of impact and burning pain. But Adrian Cross hadn't survived 10 years in the field by being unprepared. His own weapon was already drawn, his shot perfectly placed even as he fell. Volkov crumpled, the gun clattering from his hand. "Adrian." Sarah caught him as he stumbled, her hands already assessing the wound. "The bullet's still in. I need to know time." He gritted out. "Security's coming. We have to move. You're bleeding. I've been shot before. I'll be fine." He forced himself upright, ignoring the pain. "But only if we get out of here alive." They ran, Sarah supporting Adrian's weight, Adrian directing them through the estate using memory and tactical instinct. Behind them, they could hear Volkov's security breaching the building. The extraction team met them at the outer gate, black SUVs, armed operatives, and a medic who immediately began working on Adrian's shoulder. "The target?" the team leader asked. "Incapacitated. The auction's disrupted. Intel's uploaded." Adrian gasped as the medic probed the wound. "Clean sweep. And her up." The team leader looked at Sarah with obvious suspicion. "She's with me," Adrian said, his voice gaining strength despite the pain. "Non-negotiable." The team leader hesitated, clearly wanting to argue, but something in Adrian's expression stopped him. "Your career, your call." "It is," Adrian agreed, "and I'm making it." They were in the vehicle and moving within seconds, Vienna falling away behind them as they raced toward the safe house. Adrian leaned back, feeling blood loss and adrenaline crash warring in his system. "You took a bullet for me," Sarah said quietly, her hand finding his buff. "Yes." "Why?" Because somewhere between using you as cover and watching you poison an entire auction house, I fell in love with you." His voice was matter of fact, despite the weight of the words. "And people in love do stupid, illogical things. Like taking bullets." Sierra laughed, a sound caught between tears and joy. "We've known each other for days. Long enough to know you're not an asset. You're not a weapon. You're not a cover story." Adrian squeezed her hand. "You're the woman I want to disappear with, if you'll have me." A spy with a bullet in his shoulder and more enemies than friends. Sierra leaned close, her lips brushing his ear. "Sounds perfect." The safe house in Prague was nothing like Vienna's elegance. It was functional, secure, and anonymous. Perfect for people who needed to vanish. Adrian's shoulder healed over 2 weeks, during which Sarah proved surprisingly competent at field medicine. His organization debriefed them extensively, impressed despite themselves by the operation's success. Volkov's network was dismantled. The buyers were identified and targeted. The weapons were destroyed. By any metric, it was a perfect operation. Except for the part where Adrian and Sarah had violated every protocol about emotional involvement. "They want to separate us," Adrian said one evening, showing her the official communication. "Standard procedure after operations involving assets who've been compromised. You get a new identity in Australia. I get reassigned to Southeast Asia. We never see each other again." Sarah read the message, then deleted it. "Then, I suppose we're both resigning. You'd walk away from the safety they're offering." "I'd walk away from safety if it means losing you." She moved to where he sat, straddling his lap carefully to avoid his healing shoulder. "I've spent 5 years being safe and miserable. I'd rather be dangerous and happy." Adrian's hands came to rest on her hips. "We'd be rogue. No official support, no backup, no safety net. We'd have each other. That's a terrible strategic position. Maybe I'm tired of strategy." She kissed him, slow and deep. "Maybe I want to be reckless. You're the poison I can't build immunity to." Adrian murmured against her lips. "You've gotten into my system, and I don't want a cure." "Good." Sarah smiled. "Because I'm not going anywhere." They made love that night with the desperation of people who'd found something rare and were determined to keep it. Adrian's shoulder protested, but he didn't care. Sarah was careful but fierce, claiming him as thoroughly as he claimed her. Afterward, tangled in sheets and each other, Adrian traced patterns on her skin. "I never thought I'd have this," he admitted. "A future that wasn't just the next mission." "I never thought I'd want it," Sarah replied. "But you made me brave enough to choose something beyond survival." "So what do we choose? Where do we go?" Sarah considered. "Somewhere warm. Somewhere we can disappear completely. Somewhere we can build something real." "Greece," Adrian suggested. "I know an island. Small, isolated, perfect for people who need to vanish." "And what would we do there?" "Former spies don't exactly have marketable skills." "I don't know." Adrian pulled her closer. "But I think we'd figure it out, together." "Together," Sarah agreed, and sealed it with a kiss. The island of Castellarizo floated in the Mediterranean like a secret too small for tourists to bother with, too remote for anyone to care about. Perfect. Adrian now called Nikos Ran, a small boat charter service, taking locals fishing and occasionally ferrying supplies between islands. His shoulder had healed with only a faint scar to show for his last official mission. Sarah now Elena taught chemistry at the island's small school and ran a laboratory consulting business remotely. Her past was buried deep enough that even sophisticated searchers would find nothing but a boring academic. They lived in a whitewashed house overlooking the sea, with a garden Sarah was learning to cultivate and a life Adrian was learning to enjoy. "You're thinking too much," Sarah observed one evening as they watched the sunset from their terrace. "I can see the calculations running behind your eyes." "Old habits," Adrian admitted. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for someone to find us. And if they do, then we disappear again, together. Or," Sarah said, moving into his arms, "we fight, together." "I like that option better. I thought you might." She kissed him, tasting like wine and sea salt and home. "No more running. No more hiding." Adrian agreed. Below them, the Mediterranean gleamed in dying light. Somewhere, the world continued its chaos by games and weapons deals, and people doing terrible things for what they believed were good reasons. But here, on this small island with this remarkable woman, Adrian Crossor, whatever his name had been before, all the identities and missions, finally felt like he could breathe. "I love you," he said, Simple and true. I love you too, Sarah replied. My beautiful spy, retired spy. Are any of us ever truly retired? She laughed at his expression. Don't worry, I'm not suggesting we go back. I'm just saying we're who we are. Former weapons, learning to be human. It's enough. It's everything, Adrian corrected. And it was. The poison she'd carried in her blood had made him lose control of his carefully maintained, emotional distance, his professional detachment, his entire carefully constructed identity as someone who didn't need anyone. She'd destroyed his defenses completely. And he'd never been more grateful for anything in his life. As night fell over the Mediterranean, Adrian and Sarah sat together, in comfortable silence. Two dangerous people who'd found something more dangerous still. Love worth fighting for, worth disappearing for, worth living for. The spy had used the woman as a disguise, but somewhere along the way, the disguise had become the truth, and the poison she carried had saved them both. Years later, when people asked how they met, they told different versions of the truth. Sometimes it was a charity gala, sometimes a chance encounter. They never mentioned the weapons, the bullets, or the blood. But late at night, when storms rolled across the Mediterranean and the past felt close enough to touch, Sarah would trace the scar on Adrian's shoulder and whisper, "You took a bullet for me." And he would pull her closer, breathing in the scent of her hair, and reply, "I'd do it again." Every time, because some poisons, once they enter your system, change you forever. And some changes are worth dying for, or, better yet, worth living for. In the morning, they'd wake to sunlight and sea breeze, to a life they'd built from ashes and secrets. A life where the most dangerous thing they carried wasn't weapons or immunity or classified intelligence. It was hope. And that, they both agreed, was the most terrifying and beautiful poison of all. Asterisk, asterisk, author's note, asterisk, asterisk. This story explores the transformation from viewing people as tools to recognizing their humanity and our own. Adrian and Sarah begin as people using each other strategically, but discover that real connection is worth more than any mission objective. True strength isn't immunity to emotion. It's having the courage to feel despite the risk.